And the story you are about to hear is so shocking, so unprecedented, that I have no recourse but to perform it dressed entirely in a mask. And during some of the more controversial sequences of this tale, we will in fact further diminish the possibility that the person saying these heretical things can be identified by turning the lights out altogether and using for illumination the sole light of one candle power. Now, technically speaking, this camera has a limit and range of only 2 camera power lux. 2 lux equals the ability to see in the light of 2 candles, and so I'm afraid that technically speaking you won't be able to see the wrong hero, just as he is shielding his identity even now. However, the study of the hero has become a profitable cottage industry, from Joseph Campbell's best-selling book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces, to Lord Raglan's seminal but today neglected work, The Hero. But it has to be said that many who pass as heroes in today's everyday quotidian existence are in fact not really heroes in the classical sense of the word. And on the other hand, many who are not heralded as heroes are in fact heroes. One such hero is, of course, me, the wrong hero. And now I bring you for your edification a work that I call Superhero Confidential. I trust you will be edified and amused by it. If you like this presentation, tell your enemies. If you hate it, tell your friends.
Actually, I was never really part of this, but, well, wasn't that just heartrending? Mama, Louisiana, I'll tell you, it makes me kind of lament for my own lost youth. Well, what I thought I would do, quickly, is, I got the latest issue of Editorial Humor here. Let's see if I can come up with jokes right on the spot that aren't necessarily jokes. Gee, Bob Dole. Sort of sounds like the name of a stingy British pension plan, doesn't it? You know, Bob for the old Dole now. You know, geez, let's see what else is here. Gosh, you know, it takes a lot of money to run for president, doesn't it? But of course, in my own presidential campaign, I have a budget of 20 cents. That's right, 20 cents. And I got that from scrounging deposit balls. So, let's see. Oh yeah, Pat Buchanan. Why are all the liberals mad at Pat Buchanan? Because he's stealing their time, that's why. He's doing their rap about, oh, boo-hoo-hoo, the poor workman. You know, he needs an honest day's job and an honest day's pay. But then he's sort of subtly distorting it, you know. In other words, it's sort of like know-nothing populism instead of the politically correct kind. Union, yes. You know, that slogan, union, yes, it always looks like unionize. Can you imagine somebody like unionize? And now the adventures of unionize. This McDonald's is not organized according to proper union principles. People are frequently forced to do work when they've already punched out. Why don't you go out and clean up the parking lot on your way out? Well, I already punched out, boss. Just do it, or you're not going to get that promotion to assistant manager, and you won't get your franchise after 20 years of busting your ass, because we'll fire you. We'll fire you after 19 years, 11 months, and 30 days. So we won't have to give you that franchise that we promised. Oh yeah, you know, the Pat Buchanan approach to things like that, it's sort of like, geez, do you think that at some point he's going to tell the American Indian that he should go back where he came from? I mean, how do we go about doing that? Yeah. Say, fella, you're an American Indian, aren't you? Been to the Bering Strait lately? Well, I have a one-way ticket there, and you know, you can get off the mush a dog sled down to the Bering Strait there, and it'll be frozen over. You just walk across, and you know, I hear Siberia this time of year is actually magnificently desolate. Yeah. So I suggest you take a hike, Geronimo. You know what I'm saying? Quit stealing the peyote smoking and bingo jobs from honest American workers who were born in this country, and you know, just and those feathers of yours, what are they? Antennas, so you can capture cosmic rays? You think you're better than us because you wear a big feather? Oh, it's a feather in your cap, eh? You're showing the yellow feather when you do that. You can't get a VCR like normal Americans. No, you have to wear feathers and wear buffalo robes and do batik and all that other 60s crap things. And oh, you got a wounded knee, huh? Well, gee, that's just too bad.
Did the hippies get their stuff from the Indians, or did the Indians get it from the hippies? No.
Gee, I don't know how that works. I'll tell you something, though. That reminds me of what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the rooster. Huh. Anyway, yeah. You know, I like to sit around in the bathtub. I like to sit in the bathtub for hours. Sometimes I even put water in there. Say, you got a penny for the old Bob? Well, you're not visible on the camera, Steve. This is a little group thing that we're doing here. What else is in the news here besides Pat Buchanan?
Well, we got Cuba.
Cuba? Boy. It's like, like spy planes flying over Boston. Hey, let's shoot them down. Hey, you can't do that. Why not? They're spies. Yes, Boston Libertad, you know. Give Boston back to the Puritans. Yeah, that's it. It's like,
Give Boston back to the Puritans.
you know, all these people who are really hot about family values and stuff, they're the very same people who get sore at Castro for shooting those spy planes down. The same thing happened. History repeats itself over and over. Flight 007. Gee, those weren't spies. Well, let's backpedal a little here. Maybe they were spies. Maybe there was sophisticated CIA surveillance equipment on those planes. Maybe not. But the Russians didn't know that, so they had no right to shoot those planes down over Korea. Who do they think they are anyway? Oh, and Russia's lobbing shells at Taiwan. What if Long Island decided to declare
China's doing that.
Yeah, China's lobbing shells at Taiwan. And there's some live ammo. And if Long Island decided to secede from the Union, gee, didn't that happen in 1860, Fort Sumter? Didn't the Southerners say that South Carolina was independent and we shelled them? And there was a big war for 4 years? And gosh, but China shouldn't do that. We have a right to tell the most populous country in the world what to do. Because we're the United States. And another funny thing, you know,
maybe there's some veterans from South Carolina that are like tipping off. Maybe Taiwan's giving strategies from South Carolina.
Well, China's really going to start to Taiwan on, if you know what I mean. Well, the big threat that China represents is not the fact that they're lobbing shells in Taiwan. It's the fact that they're going to suck up all the gasoline and rice, and there won't be any left. You know? And that reminds me, I mean, history seems to be flowing backwards. They want to privatize Social Security. What is this shit? It's like, well, why don't we just like go the whole hog and like make history run backwards? The Challenger will reassemble itself in midair and get sucked back down into the launch pad. John Hinckley will suck a bullet out of Ronald Reagan's left lung. Lee Harvey Oswald will suck a bullet out of JFK. Franklin Delano Roosevelt will take electricity away from farmers. You know, and this whole thing with history, it seems to be repeating itself, running backwards, forwards, every which way. Remember, the man who does not know what happened before he was born remains a child for the rest of his life. There was some Roman daddy-o that said that. Do I seem frivolous? Am I talking about am I not competent?
That's even better than Hayakawa.
Samuel, what? You mean the senator?
Yeah.
Well, what about him? He was a
Just said anyone who doesn't know history is not to repeat it.
Oh, no, that was Santayana, not Hayakawa. Santayana. Harvard man. Class of ought. Yeah, what are the Harvard people going to do? They going to walk around with two big zeros on your chest as they're the class of 2000? I'm wondering about this. Will the women think it's politically correct to have these two gigantic zeros on
He
the
was
chest?
class of 1900?
I think he was. It might have been odd 6, odd 8. You know, when you get to be my age, these little facts just don't matter.
Well, why don't you explain to the non-Harvard people, Francis? What does it odd mean?
Oh, it's zero. The class of 1900. He was a professor at Harvard.
Odd, they call it?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I don't know. What should we call that era?
Well, that sounds like something they would wear in, like, you know, like Archie comics or something. You know,
Right.
Double,
Big Moose would wear it. Two big
He
zeros.
did, yeah.
Yeah, see? It just goes to show.
Big Moose and Santa, yeah.
Hey, man, they're swinging. I can just see a big conversation between the two.
It would just basically be, if we don't know history, we're doomed to repeat it.
Well, Big Moose. Well, Big Moose. Bishop Berkeley talked very learnedly about the nature of reality and how we can really never know what's real and what is merely something which we have conjured up through the very fact that we perceive it.
Yeah, they do. That's called Dilton Doily. That's what he was.
Right. You touch Midge, I'll smash. Yeah, Big Moose.
Stay away from my girl.
Big Moose and Midge. Do you know what a midge is? It's a little insect, you know? So like, Big Moose has a midge on, really slap his snout, get it off there. I once read a very heart-rending Archie comic in an anthology of the famous Archie comics. Now it's shut out the light, shut out the sun, shut out the rain, shut out the pain.
Just hold it. No.
Blacklight hero. Dun 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 dun. Blacklight hero. Dun 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 dun. Oops, I threw the candle out. Yeah. All right. It's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness.
Now you won't be able to do it because it's covered with wax.
Well, we'll see about that. Ouch. Wow. Nice. This is what I used to do when I was 10 years old. My mother and my grandmother were downstairs and they wanted to be alone. And I didn't understand this. So I'd be up upstairs in the bedroom going, and then they finally let me down. Like I would really, whoa. Well,
I'll take care of it.
oh, wait a minute. Just pour some of the wax out right into the garbage can with the highly flammable paper products in it. Yeah. I'm still really struck by that Mama Louisiana. What is that, Dave Duke's campaign song? The whole reason Buchanan got his start was...
Mama Louisiana is like Sweet Home Alabama or something?
Oh, I don't know. They were doing that at the Cafe Liberty. And the whole reason Buchanan won in Louisiana is because he tapped all of David Duke's supporters. When David Duke ran for president in 1988, he got like 10% of the vote. He was in double digits. And, in 92, well, who cares what happened in 92, right? That wasn't really a very pivotal election at all. Perot sort of screwed things up for them. But Graham was a fool to run against Buchanan in Louisiana. I mean, hell, Buchanan could have had Hitler as his running mate, and probably does. Yeah, who's Buchanan? They're going to have to come up with somebody so nutty. If Buchanan gets the nomination and he wins, who is his vice president going to be? Who could they possibly get who's, more of a demagogue?
Jerry Lewis or like Herbie in the Love Boat or something like that.
Yeah, someone less desirable than Pat
You can't even Herbie. You can't Herbie ticket.
Well, I don't know. You could probably think of plenty of
Professor wore tennis shoes, the chimpanzee.
Strom Thurmond. There you go. There's a good
He's 96 though.
Yeah, exactly. No one would bump off Buchanan if Strom was there. You know what I'm saying? It's like the president's 96 years old. Well,
sound logic, Francis.
Yes, indeed. Well, maybe, wonder if Ross Perot's going to run again. By the time this airs, we might very well know for sure.
Frank Perdue's not doing his own commercials anymore. His son is.
Well, Frank,
for Ross Perot.
I think Frank's kind of on his sickbed these days, He's passing the torch, so to speak. And that reminds me of Tommy Vance Coy, who you may have heard on your own radio station, but who had this place in Erie, Pennsylvania called the Diamond Mine. And he used to have this incredibly irresistible pitch. You've got to buy our diamond. It's like finding money. Only you decide how much you want to find. This Easter Sunday, why not let your girlfriend be envious of other girls? Not envious of them. The diamond from Tommy Vance Coy Jr. then he got his son doing it for a while, and his son talked in this sort of dead monotone, like, "Hi, I'm Tony Vanscoy. My dad said."
My dad.
Yeah, we went from amphetamine to Thorazine in one generation here. And that's the weird thing.
It's like Brian Wilson, you know.
All these things, Ritalin, you know, it was a ticking time bomb in the heart of the youth culture. All these 8-year-olds that were like hyperactive, well, I just dosed them on drugs. Now they're snorting this stuff. They're like,
That's right, the Ritalin generation. That's what slackers are, right? The 20-somethings are like the Ritalin generation.
well, if you were drugged,
Ritalin and Prozac.
if you were drugged from an impressionable age, you would probably think that it's okay not to do anything. Yes.
Well, we had TV, that's, you know, halfway.
That's a drug, man. Hey, like, I'm serious, you know.
At least there were some cool things that came out of TV, you know.
Yeah, like Lost in Space.
Yeah, the monkeys, I mean, you know, what does Ritalin have to compare with those things?
What is cool, but a psychopathic disregard for what the mainstream thinks is desirable?
How about, let's hear some Lipstick Traces quotes.
Lipstick.
Some situationist.
There is only one criteria. Does it threaten the status quo? I think Johnny Rotten said that in 1978. Oh, excuse me, John Lydon, please, you know.
How about Sid Vicious? What was his original name?
David Ritchie or something like that. I don't know.
You know about that interview that made him totally famous, where the interviewer challenged them to say something
Lead off, you sodding butter. Butter off, you bleeding sod. I don't got this lingo down, you know. There's a word they use in British magazines which you never see in this country. It's shambolic. I suppose it's one of those portmanteau words that Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland discussed. You know, like smog or something like that. Hey, Fall Guy's making a big comeback, but now they're smog hat, ecologically conscious. And
Smog.
And Fleetwood Mac is now Fleetwood Mac Man, and they're going to go on a tour with the people that do Jump.
Well, Smog Cat could do slow riding. It could be about solar cars, because it could be slow.
There you go. Smog Hat. Slow ride, take it easy.
Oh, now it's getting cloudy.
Hey, yeah. Well, I don't think solar cars are going to be the big thing. It's going to be electric cars. Where does the electricity come from? Polluting coal-fired plants, of course.
Yeah.
That'll solve all our problems.
Transported in, stored in inefficient batteries, losing 10% energy here, 20% there. Oh well.
Here's the perfect source of transportation energy. It's cheap, 90% efficient, and not only that, but it would benefit the physical well-being of those who utilize it. It's called the bicycle. Look into it.
There's always walking, you know.
Yeah,
Walking is better because when you bike, you have to worry about getting hit by cars.
That's right.
So when you walk, you don't have to.
You have to worry about getting mugged by people who cheer at you from their pickup trucks because you're on foot. Hey, he must be a caveman. He's on foot. Let's hit him with our clubs.
About 2 months ago, someone tried to run me over in Watertown. I was just walking on the street.
How did
I
cavemen?
swerved and tried to.
How did cavemen secure their vehicles? Did they use the club? And when Superboy had his bicycle, did he use a kryptonite lock? Can't go, getting weak, can't understand.
Can't shift into second.
Superboy, get rid of the kryptonite lock, says Streaky the super cat, communicating telepathically, even though Streaky didn't show up on the scene for about 10 years later. Yeah, how does Superman age anyway? I mean, by now, you'd think he'd be about 70 years old. Maybe after he got out of high school, he only aged 1 year for every 4 years that ordinary Earthmen aged. How do they explain this discrepancy? And Peter Parker, he's another one.
Who are the creators of Superman, Francis?
Like Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, one of whom just died recently.
Didn't they escape from the Nazis in the 1930s?
Oh no, they were just teenagers. They lived in Ohio. I think they lived in Cleveland. They were doing science fiction mags.
I heard that the creator of Superman was a Jewish immigrant from Germany or someplace.
Maybe the son of a Jewish immigrant, but they created it in 33. There weren't that many Jewish immigrants. They were like 16, 14 years old when they first created the notion of Superman. The first Superman story was called The Reign of the Superman, but Superman was a villain who looked an awful lot like the ultra-humanite of the earliest Superman stories, who later became Lex Luthor. Looked, bald guy, evil scientist. The evil mad scientist, it's the oldest goddamn cliche in science fiction. They milked every single cliche in order to bring Superman to fruition. And they also milked every Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces cliche. Born in a manger, well, actually on Krypton. Traveled a far distance, well, actually across interstellar space. Perfect in thought, word, and deed. His natural parents are dead. He is an orphan. Brought up, suckled, like the wolves suckled Romulus and Remus by the kindly Kents. And you know what little Clark said? Kent satisfies best. No, actually, that's what they said at Kent State. But anyway, that's a bad joke. One time I read a Superman story in which this young would-be detective boy thought he could figure out that Clark Kent was Superman, and he implausibly enough got a job in a restaurant, threw a Danish at Clark Kent's ear, and tried to compare it with a plaster cast he had somehow implausibly made of Superman's ear to see if they were identical. But Clark got wind of this scheme and melted the Danish with his heat vision, because he noticed that the boy carefully wrapped it in a napkin instead of throwing it out. So then he decided to fool the child by pretending that he was bald. And of course the kid was too stupid to realize that it was a bald wig over his natural hair. And so he thought, oh, Superman can't be bald, so I guess Clark Kent isn't Superman. And his father sends him to the drugstore on an errand, and he comes back, and he has a pack of cigarettes and a candy bar in his hand that he went to the drugstore to get for his dad. And he says, gee, if only I could figure out who Superman really was. And in his hand was a Clark bar and a package of Kent cigarettes. And the little smirky editorial thing said, you never knew how close you came, Alan. And then 3 months later, everybody started writing in and saying, hey, how come he was a minor and he's allowed to buy cigarettes? And the editor, of course, they made a specialty.
What year is this now?
67, probably. They made a specialty of wiggling their way out of these things. And they said, oh, his father must have called the drugstore ahead of time, told him the child was going to pick him up. The letters to Superman were the best part of the whole thing to a certain degree. Because there were two things.
When were they? When did they have letters?
Oh, they've always had letters. They still have them. But back in the 60s, they were like, Jimmy Olsen steals a plover's egg from the zoo, but plovers do not lay eggs in captivity. They're always trying to catch him in these little inconsistencies. In page 16, panel 7, Superman's S was yellow, but in page 18, panel 3, it was blue. Well, we're not responsible. And then they always came up with, and then they say, you may answer with a wisecrack. Like they knew that the editors weren't going to give them a serious answer. So the editors would say something like, gee, I guess Superman must have really felt blue that day. Remember, these DC Comics were the same geniuses who ran a comic book called The Adventures of Jerry Lewis, right up till 1970. And they ran another comic book called The Adventures of Bob Hope, right up until 1968, believe it or not. It's true, because I have...
Were these people involved in the production of the comic, or did they get...
No, of course not. What, are you kidding? Jerry Lewis is going to waste his time writing the script for a damn comic.
Did he get permission to it?
Of course, they got royalties. What do you think? This is America. And there was always one full page of Jerry Lewis stuff, jokes from Jerry, which of course he probably had no hand in writing whatsoever. And they were really lame jokes, like, a friend of mine decided to call his dog Jerry Lewis, and I was embarrassed to be walking down the street near his house one day, and he was screaming, Jerry Lewis, get out from under that car. So, similarly lame jokes like that. But the thing is, towards the end of the 70s, even they realized that the Adventures of Jerry Lewis, the Adventures of Bob Hope, wasn't grabbing their youthful audience, so they jazzed them up. And in the case of Jerry Lewis, they added this witch. I think her name was Witchcraft. And he had this bratty nephew named Renfrew. And in the Adventures of Bob Hope, they had this guy who looked like a beetle, and he had a guitar, and he called himself Super Hip.
Super Hip.
And he was meek, mild Tadwaller Jutefruce, whose father was the magnate of Jutefruce's fruit juices. And but then whenever he got mad, he would spin around like a dervish and become super hip. and he was always like using that kooky teen lingo that the kids were using, like hip and groovy and fab, oh yeah, and all that. The archaic lingo that was maybe hot in '64, but this is '67. They were always like 3 or 5 years behind the curve there. And the people at the high school, they weren't normal people. They all looked like movie monsters. Like one of the high school teachers looked like Frankenstein, the shop teacher. And imaginatively enough, his name was, can you guess? Frankenstein, of course. But whenever you pointed out to him that he looked like Frankenstein, he would get furiously angry and start smashing things. And Cadwallader Jutefroos was always right there. He was always like, please, I beg you, don't mention it to him. Say, you look just like, no, please, don't say it. Frankenstein, boom, and isn't it weird? I mean, I could have been reading Plutarch's Lives. I could have been reading the collected works of William Shakespeare, William Webster. I mean, and I was wasting my energy and my time and my intellect on these horrible, horrendous, even if I were reading good comic books, it would have been different, And there were quite a few.
What was better than Superman back then?
Spider-Man was always much better than Superman. Well, from issue number 1 to issue number 40 or so, Spider-Man was the best. And
what years are you talking about?
62 to about 66. And then from issues 40 to about issue 90, they were still pretty good. They had John Romita. They got rid of Steve Ditko because they didn't agree with the storyline that he had scoped out. They couldn't agree on what the identity of the Green Goblin would be and whether the woman he was later to marry, Mary Jane, was beautiful or ugly. Of such controversies, that's what animated Spider-Man. It got really lame by issue number 100 when he sprouted like 4 new arms. And then around issue number 130 it got really lame because they had this lame clone thing, like his girlfriend who tragically died in issue number 121 was cloned by this crackpot professor. And again, it's the evil mad scientist. And as good as the Spider-Mans were back in the early 60s, they still had the evil mad scientist on virtually every single story. It's like Dr. Octopus, Otto Octavius, PhD, experimenting with, and this peculiar notion that radioactivity would somehow give you superpowers instead of making you bald and making you hemorrhage blood. No, radioactivity is our friend. It's jolly Mr. Plutonium. We call him PU for short. He doesn't seem to mind. Yeah, so it's just amazing. Back in the 1860s, a reasonably educated person would be studying Latin and Greek if they were in a sort of circumstance which would enable them to pursue higher education as a child. And in the 1960s, Latin, Greek, that's for sissies. I want to read the Adventures of Super Hip and Stanley and his Monster. I just realized something. This is a blinding revelation. DC Comics was basically copying the British comic books, which are very different from ours because they're not really superhero books. The comic books for children that were published in Great Britain right up until the time that Viz came out, which is a parody of the British comic books, were always these like little gimmick stories like Stanley and his fish, things like that. I'll just pop a banana and become Banana Man. And they had little spin-offs of movies like Jaws and Rambo. And they had this boarding school called Fright School, where all the teachers were robots and zombies. And the worst one though was actually it was my favorite one, so I shouldn't say it was the worst. Ivor Lott and Tony Broke. 2 blokes going to a boarding school. One of them didn't have any money and the other was filthy rich, but the honest, good, poor kid always got the better of his scheming, rich counterpart. It was sort of like Richie Rich, I suppose.
It's like Goofus and Gallon a little bit.
Yeah, that too. All these lame dichotomies. Why don't they do
Prince of the Pauper meets Goofus and Gallon.
It's like they read Hegel. They got the thesis and the antithesis, but they never got the synthesis. They left that chapter out. Then why didn't they have a third character? DC did this all the time. They'd have these diametrically opposed characters. really vital. I guess the limited attention spans of their readers couldn't countenance three heroes having.
Well, who would be a good synthesis character for Batman and Robin?
And that's a good question. The Joker, of course. No, well, there's Batgirl and there was two Batgirls, actually. There was the one in the 50s who was like a teenager, always getting the mischief, usually cavorting with Batman's pals like Ace the Bat Hound and Batmite. It's amazing they didn't have a Bat Cat.
Did these characters get developed at all? Batmite and
Oh, yeah. They would show up like a bad penny at least once every 6 months and often once every 3 months.
Is this early 60s you're talking about?
Late 50s, early 60s. Batmite was sort of like the counterpart to Mr. Mxyzptlk, the mischievous, zany sprite in the Superman stories. The whole thing with Superman, they had all these animal spin-offs. That was a direct ripoff of Captain Marvel and the Marvel family that the Fawcett publications came out with in the 40s and early 50s until they were sued by DC and forced to drop their Captain Marvel character, which DC bought the rights to and revived in the 70s because they were afraid that Marvel Comics, who had the rights to the name Captain Marvel, would capitalize on it. So they couldn't even call him Captain Marvel in the title. They would refer to him as Shazam. What a disgrace. But Captain Marvel had the Marvel family, like Marvel Girl, Marvel Boy, Old Uncle Marvel, Talkie Tawny, the Talking Tiger. So Superman did the same thing, except...
Well, I certainly hope you found that as edifying as I did. I suppose I ought to finish what I was in the process of saying before time limitations
You
caused
wanted to see
me
me, Mrs. Abbott? Oh, yes, Archie.
to have to conclude this
I still
presentation.
cannot believe you're leaving. Oh, I'm having trouble believing it myself. How many years has it been? That's not fair. You might as well ask my age.
Well, anyway, let's get rid of that tedious twaddle for at least a precious moment. And I guess what I was getting at with that was that the Superman family became very derivative of the Marvel family. And this is no blinding revelation that I came up with on my own. I think it's been discussed in several histories of the comics. Notably, there's one about the Silver Age, which I don't remember the name of the guy who wrote it, but it's a pretty comprehensive overview of the superhero comics spanning roughly from 1955 to say about 1975. I suppose everything after 1980 with the rise of the independents would be referred to as the Bronze Age. Say, roughly speaking, from Cerebus #1, which I think came out in 1978, to the present day. There was this gray area of the comic book. But anyway, what I was getting at was that the Superman family, they began running out of plots around 1946, roughly 8 years after the inception of the strip. In that manner, a good superhero comic is very much like a sitcom, in that the first couple of seasons they work it out, and then there's some cast changes, some personnel changes, new people are brought in, and it revives itself for another 2 or 3 years, and then it starts losing steam again, and so yet another change is made, and in the formula, some drastic new concept is brought in, like say the Beverly Hillbillies are sent to London, England, or something like that for a year. And finally, by about the 7th or 8th year, the whole thing runs out of steam, and they either got to get new people to produce it, or it dies an untimely death. Well, with Superman, Siegel and Schuster basically weren't really very much involved with it after the first 7 or 8 years or so. The creators, as a matter of fact, signed away their rights for a mere pittance, I might add. And although they were later recompensed by DC Comics following in the wake of the first Superman movie, roughly 1978, when there were royalties aplenty to be made. This is all a very roundabout way of saying that in order to jazz up the Superman stuff, first of all, they adapted the device of kryptonite from the radio serials because they needed to make this incredibly super powerful being somehow vulnerable, and they couldn't grasp the subtlety of doing it with his emotions. so they had to have some sort of some artificial nemesis to sap him of his strength at the most inconvenient moment so he could be truly heroic instead of merely a god stalking the earth and putting things right. Much like the Nietzschean Superman, I would imagine. Devoid of pity and affect. But, you know, and Kryptonite sort of jazzed it up for a while. Also, the world's most super powerful man eventually became the world's most powerless man. They started playing the whole thing for laughs in the period roughly from 1946 to, let's say, 1958 or so. I sort of came to them in that period of 1958 and thereabouts. So I have something of an appreciation of that whole era, which I would say roughly spans the years 1958 to about 1964, but sort of petered out along the lines of 1968 or so, when they got wholly new art. They got totally new artists. They got rid of the boring boxy format, and they started like spreading it out a little. But basically, they were just padding it. I mean, back in say a good year, let's say 61, 62, you could pick up a Superman comic. You'd get 4 stories, each of 6 pages in length, and each page would probably have 6 to 8 panels. And you knew what you were getting for your money. You were getting this sort of vaguely adventurous story with a slight O. Henry type twist at the end, generally. But it was in the period, first they came up with Mr. Mxyzptlk, the zany sprite from the 5th dimension who could do anything. And, you know, that of course opened up a whole possibility. Then they came up with all the old Joseph Campbell type leitmotifs like, and I say Joseph Campbell not because he invented this notion, but because that's what most people associate, even though what we really should be talking about is the Golden Bough and much better known, or at least much more seminal works of folklore and mythology. But anyway, DC Comics eventually started jazzing things up by introducing various varieties of kryptonite, the bizarre, the bizarros, the twisted and perfect doppelganger of Superman, created by the evil scientist Lex Luthor. If it wasn't Luthor or Brainiac who was opposing Superman, it was like these sort of joke opponents like the Prankster and the Toy Man and whatnot. Batman had much more interesting villains like Two-Face and the Joker and the Riddler and the Catwoman, all the ones that we all know, probably from the television show. Anyway, and then after the Marvel family bit the dust in 1953 as a result of that lawsuit that DC brought against them, Superman sort of took up whole big chunks of the Captain Marvel mythology and appropriated it into the Superman mythology and created what was in effect the Superman family. It's beginning with Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane in 1958, actually beginning with Superman's best pal Jimmy Olsen in 56, and then Superboy comics, and so you had a teenage Superboy, you had the adventures of his girlfriend and his best friend, but then you had all these stories about Krypto the super dog, and then you had Supergirl, who first appeared in 1958, got her own adventures in 1961 thereabouts in Adventure Comics. So then not only did you have Superman's pet, Krypto the super dog, but you also had Beppo the super monkey, and Supergirl had her own pets, Streaky the super cat, Comet the super horse. And then they started getting ridiculous, as if the notion of a flying man from Krypton isn't ridiculous enough. Then you had all these pets who used to think like humans, even though a dog supposedly has an IQ of only 20. And I wish I could track down the source for that information, because I'm not quite sure how they come to the conclusion that a dog has an IQ of 20. Isn't that right, Mona? But anyway, this whole convoluted thing that I'm getting into is basically just a way of saying that whenever they have a superhero comic, it sort of gets stale after about 8 years, and they have to jazz it up, and they always end up doing incredible damage to it. What they really should do, since the readership for comic books turns over about once every 8 years, is just to get a new artist, a new writer, and start doing the same thing all over again, but through a different lens filter instead of trying to elaborate the mythos more than they already have. So anyway, I'm writing down the citations here so that when I give this learned paper before the American Academy of English, that I'll have some sort of systematic approach to it. They always ruin legends by trying to over-elaborate them when they should really just simply tell the same story over and over again. If the myth is strong enough, it can withstand being seen, Rashomon-like, through 8 different points of view. And even given a conservative estimate of 6 years as the lifespan of the average myth, and we're talking about monthly publication for 6 years, which would be 48, 50 issues. You could redo the comic book every 50 issues or so, and in that way, perpetuate it, say, 8 times. So you'd have 300, 400 issues. Anyhow, that's basically what the Cerebus comic strip is doing. But the thing, I might as well discuss the Cerebus family, since I've already mentioned it. It's a comic book put out by David Sim and Gerhard, and I recently had the pleasure of reading every single last one of them, and up to about the present, which is, they're now on issue number 199, and I've read every issue except the issues from number 187 to 198, which will soon be collected, I suppose, as a Cerebus anthology. The last one that came out was called Reads, and that really fell apart. At first it was kind of interesting, and then the author sort of gets in there and erases the distinction between the guy who's writing this legend and the actual legend itself. And that was really too bad, because it was just, my friend, after around issue number 100, he began referring to Cerebus as padded aardvark tales, which they certainly became. But strangely enough, they really picked up steam again after issue number 120. It's like, for the first 25 issues of Cerebus, it was like they were sort of setting it up, although they didn't really realize it at the time. But they were like setting up all of the characters who were to recur throughout its run to the, up to issue 200. And the second 25 issues was the first really continuous story. And then the issues number 25 to 50 to about number 125 or so, that was one continuous story as well. Although there was a hiatus of sorts where it became padded aardvark tales. And then there was a section on called Women, and that was quite good. He sort of digressed for several issues. Called Melmoth. Talked about Oscar Wilde, and then he digressed for a few more issues, and sort of talked about the main female character for a while. And those are good. And then it's back to the main storyline, and it's, I don't know, it's variable in quality. But anyway, to conclude this portion of the presentation, just let me reiterate that people who make legends and myths of the comic book variety ought to be more circumspect about jazzing the thing up. Like, they should leave the hero's parents or foster parents alone. They should not give the hero's girlfriend superpowers, even in a dream sequence. If they want to do, at least all of these things that they could so easily avoid. And they should sort of avoid altering the nature of the hero, even on a temporary basis, in such a way that renders the whole scheme inconsistent with the whole. Like, the famous "This Was All a Dream" year of the Dallas television show. A storyline so implausible that after a year they have to say, "Oh, it was all a dream," and it never happened. Anyway, people should avoid doing that. In an ideal world they would, but this is an imperfect world. The strain of putting out something on a monthly basis, let alone a weekly basis, is enough to make you resort to desperate measures. And as a matter of fact, I know this all too well, because I am the wrong hero. And of course, you can see this show every week. And in any event, I'm going to ring off now, but I'll be back with more at a time which will, for you, in the temporal sense, be momentary, but for me will probably be several days from now. And you are tuned to Cafe Cabaret. I'm the Wrong Hero, and this presentation is entitled Superhero Confidential. Hi, I'm the Wrong Hero, and welcome once again to the presentation called Superhero Confidential. You know, when you're a superhero like me, this book, the Overstreet, comic book price guide, is sort of like a high school photo album yearbook. What that is to you, the Overstreet comic book price guide, you'll notice I have the silver anniversary edition, celebrating 100 years of comic history and 25 years of the guide itself. It's a fascinating book, and it sure does get all sorts of pretty pictures, which of course you can't see. Just once I'd like to say something like Primo Levi's periodic tables as a graphic novel instead of Leonard Nimoy's Prime Mortals. I mean, you know that Leonard probably didn't have very much to do with it at all. Maybe he wrote it, maybe not, but I mean, his name stuck up there. All these impressionable Star Trek fans, they're going to be going, oh, well, Leonard Nimoy, gotta have it. That's the thing with comic fans. No matter how worthless something is, if it's part of a series and they don't have it, then their immediate reaction is not to think, well, Badger #2 was really a low point in the howsoever critically acclaimed Badger series, and so I think I will refrain from purchasing it. No, they don't say that. They say, gotta have it, $15, gotta have it. $50, gotta have it. $200,000, well, how's about a trade? I'll trade you my copy of Superman #50 for Badger #2. Sold, ding. Badger #2 is not worth $200,000. That's $200. Oh well, you're screwed. So, anyway, yes, I remember I sold off quite a few of my comic books to a fellow who gave me a very fair price. Of course, he wasn't a professional, right? He was just a collector. So, he dickered back and forth, but surprisingly, he didn't dispute any of the prices I set. Probably knew he was getting a bargain, but I sold him one of my Batmans from the 1940s, which was in pretty rugged shape, but it's nice to have a golden age comic book around the house, especially if you're a big Batman fan. Batman just was incredibly tedious. Mona, get out of there. In the 40s, just like Superman. The late 40s was not a good time for the superhero racket. In fact, that's when the crime comic books started getting a foothold. Even the people who published EC publications, even they had to get in on the act with their true crime series, which I have copies of. But yes, Superman was a clown and Batman was almost as bad. He walked around in his underwear in the daytime. I could see prancing around in a ridiculous outfit like that at night. It makes some sort of sense. But in the daytime, in broad daylight, come off it. I mean, Superman, you're not going to tell him he looks like a fool, even if he does. Because, the man can practically tell you what you had for breakfast 15 years ago. You go back in time, well, you had eggs Benedict on that day. That's why he would make a great prosecuting attorney. He would catch people in so many lies and inconsistencies. They call Batman the world's greatest detective, but I think it would be Superman who in fact would be a great lawyer. So you claim that you were at the movies and alone, like anybody goes to the movies alone, and you left at approximately 4:15. Well, I have photographic proof right here because in my Superman identity, I went back in time and took a picture of you emerging from the Kit Kat nightclub with a smoking gun in your left hand. Okay, I did it, you know, like that never happens in a court of law, but it would if Superman were, in fact, the prosecuting attorney. You know, I've got some eggs on the burner, and it's a real shame. I mean, they're not really eggs, they're sort of like egg-like substance, those freezer eggs that you have in little cartons, and it takes 30 minutes to thaw them. I mean, in that time, I could run to the store and buy fresh eggs and be back. But of course, the big advantage is that these are no cholesterol eggs, and you know, I have to get back my youthful figure if anybody's, if I'm going to have any credibility as a superhero or with my peers in the superhero world. Now, the notion of a comedian who is also a superhero might seem strange to some, but you comedians out there in the audience, if there are any, the comedian is really the closest thing we have to a superhero, and every comedian has his own gimmick, which corresponds to some degree to the gimmickry of the superhero's power or powers. You know, Robin Williams, it's like improvisation man. You know, he's all over the map. You know, it's like going to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston in one day and seeing everything in 1 minute. You know, from Egyptian statuary to Cézanne to Rodin to the Italian, you know, Renaissance, the Impressionists. You know, he's like the Flash. You know, and whatever happened to the Flash anyway? They had that TV series with him, which I never saw, which didn't sound like a very good idea. Of all the heroes to do a TV series about, the Flash, the guy you can't see because he runs so fast, you know, it's like, the Flash teamed up with the Invisible Man. Oh, well, nobody watches it, but we didn't have to pay our stars anything because they're never on the screen, you know. It's like, Mr. Fantastic, and that's why they can never bring the Fantastic Four to a live action type TV series. The cost of stretching Mr. Fantastic's arms around would be prohibitive, although with computer morphing and the like, I imagine at some time they will in fact be able to do it. In any event, let me turn my eggs off here. Oof, they're burning, they're scorching on the bottom. See, that's the problem with these damn eggs. They don't look real and they scorch on the bottom. And when they do, they smell like cardboard. What are they called anyway? Egg beaters, or not even egg beaters, you know? I didn't even have the, oh yeah, these are egg beaters. Healthy, real egg product. For a minute there I thought I was going to say egg food product. Mona, come here. Mona, come here. There's Mona. I don't know if you can see her. That's right, go right up to the camera. That's a good dog. Oh, look, they're all scorched on the bottom. Do I really want to eat these? Mona, no, you don't want to eat them either. They have onions in them. Dogs don't like onions. Hey, don't tell me what dogs like. I'm a dog. You're not. That's one thing I got over you, master. Yeah, that's the sarcastic dog. Oh, well, okay, master. Well, I let these horrible eggs cool off. Oh, look at this. See? Hey, if you eat that black stuff, it can cause cancer. It's like, oh, who cares? Anyway, I was off on a tangent here, and we were discussing how comedians sort of correspond to superheroes, which of course is a pretty self-serving assessment of the genre. If you really want to know the truth, it's like, sure, okay, whatever you say. Black is white and white is red. Uh-oh, I turned the daytime thingy on. Can I get the thing to turn off? You know, this is such a pain in the ass. You know, because you just make the slightest wrong move and you turn this thing on, which you never want. Who wants to date your presentations, you know? That 1989 is when I actually got this camera. Let's see, number one is, all right, we got about an hour left here. An hour for me to babble on. We'll talk a little bit in the digression portion of our presentation, which will constitute a good 90% of it, I suspect, that
Well, yeah, so, and Sam Kinison, of course, was Shouting Man, you know, ah, ah, and Bob Goldthwait is like Whining Man, and Stephen Wright is sort of like Theoretical Man, you know, and so forth and on and on. Yeah, you know, once you get on Saturday Night Live, unless you're Tim Mathewson, you have it made for life. You can like coast on that for the rest of your natural-born days. Look at Chevy Chase, for example. You know what I'm saying here? Dan Aykroyd. I mean, come on. You think these guys would actually be famous and popular if there were any justice in the world? Well, actually, I don't know if Dan Aykroyd is particularly popular, and I do believe that Chevy Chase is sort of not exactly Mr. Personality, but you know what I'm getting at. I mean, 15 years ago, they were on some crummy little primetime, you know, some crummy little Saturday evening program. You know that England has its own version of Saturday night? I think it's called Saturday Live or something like that. Well, isn't that just like them? You know, they can't just be honest and say, we're ripping off your show, we're going to call it exactly that, sticking a little UK on the end of it. No, they're British, and so you know, everything's got to be more refined. You know, oh, Saturday Night Live, oh, how vulgar, oh, Cedric, hand me the smelling salts. We'll call our program Saturday Live. The thing is, people have this popular impression of the British as being snobs. Now, not all of them are snobs. A lot of them are bigots and racist, but a good many of them are salt of the earth, you know. Folks named Alf with those floppy little caps that they wear, and they drop their H's and they eat fish and chips out of newspapers, even though that practice has now been banned. And, you know, and they say, keep your chin up now, and, you know, no, we love you, Mr. Chips, and stuff like that. Anyhow, yes, I was getting back to comedians as superheroes. Well, you know, then there's Bartman comics, where you have a animated humorous cartoon character who's also a superhero. My God, look at this. Pebbles and Bam Bam. And they're standing in front of a picture of themselves in wedding regalia. And a hapless thumbnail-sized Fred is in the far background observing their doings. Let's see. I can just barely read it. What does it say? Sure. Something about an electric toothbrush or something. Sure, and someday there will be an electric toothbrush. Oh, I see. Bam Bam is sort of scoffing at the notion that they will marry. They're looking at each other in the magic mirror. And, well, what's Fred doing there? I guess Fred's the one that's got the brand recognition, so they got to stick him in there somehow. You know, of all the comic book houses that came out with their own line of superheroes in the wake of the successful national publications and Atlas publications, superheroes, you know, on the national side, you had Batman, Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, etc., Aquaman. And on the Atlas people had like sort of analogous ones, but they were always a little bit like, I don't know, tarnished somehow. Aquaman was wholesome, but the original prototype, the Submariner, who came before Aquaman, was, yeah, he was sneering and evil. I mean, the Atlas, later Marvel publications heroes always had this sort of, they were like the bad heroes, you know. The DC heroes were too wholesome to be believed. They were the Ozzie and Harriet heroes, and the Atlas Marvel heroes, well, they're sort of like the Married with Children heroes. In fact, don't they publish Married with Children? It gets confusing. The worlds of rock and roll and television sometimes fold up into the world of comic books in a confusing way. It's called crossover. Marvel Atlas did it all the time in the 40s. The Justice League, Justice Society, it's just all one big crossover. But now it's practically a pestilence. Now, crossover means that a hero from one book guest stars in another book. And of course, this happens all the time on television
not, but in comic books, somehow, for some bizarre reason, an inferior story, which is the result of a diluted crossover impulse, is in fact considered a valuable collector's item. Nobody collects old television programs with quite the avidity that they collect old comic books, maybe because those are still broadcast from time to time, except for the ones that have been irreparably lost. And the ones that are lost for good, no doubt. I mean, most people didn't have recording technology back when it would have been apropos. Yeah, I recorded this rare vintage television program on my oh my God, Cuckoo Comics, about the most poorly written, poorly drawn, my God, and they call themselves America's funniest magazine, Count Duckula. Boy, a duck with no teeth is somehow going to be Dracula. Anyway, I sort of lost my train of thought there. Forgive me. It's just looking through this sort of thing, it just brings back memories. Casper the Friendly Ghost. Yeah, okay. And his friends. Oh, yeah, okay, his friends. A gigantic retarded baby duck. Ooh, this is repulsive. They're like under the water in a submarine, and they're looking at various fish who look exactly like them. And like Herman the cat, or Herman the mouse, Catnip the cat, little Audrey, and baby Huey, and then hovering over them is this dead baby ghost. My God. Who looked considerably different when he first came out. He was sort of, I don't know, his body was fatter and his head was smaller. And he looked more like a real ghost. And eventually his features became more like that of a balloon or Poppin' Fresh. So, in any event, I know it's probably not very much fun for you to watch me go off on these tangents. So I'll try to keep to the matter at hand. Oh, I was talking about crossovers, yeah. And well, those world's finest comics, it's quite possible that DC Comics was the innovator, as they claim, in 9 out of every 10 comic book innovations, howsoever dubious those might have been. The first boy sidekick, Robin. The first crossover comic, World's Finest, originally called World's Best. See, this is the little arcana that only the truly devoted comic book fan would know, that the comic book World's Finest, which for many issues teamed Batman and Superman, was in fact published in 1940 as a commemorative edition commemorating the World's Fair, and was called World's Best. And in any event, if you're not a comic book fan, then perhaps I should stop boring you with all these little ins and outs. And even by the standards of comic fandom, I might not be considered particularly knowledgeable because, I know all the old stuff. I know a little bit about the Golden Age, quite a bit about the Silver Age, and a great deal about the early years of what I refer to as the Bronze Age, which began around 1979, 1980, and to my mind anyway, continues today, but particularly up to about 1988 when I sort of lost interest in reading comic books. I used to read them obsessively, but I just, this comedy thing and this television show, I mean, who has time anymore, right? So I sold quite a few of my most prized possessions. In part in order to finance my move to this clean new studio that I now have for the production of these videos. It's very well lit, as you can see, and there's even the house dog, right, Mona? And it's pretty good. Mona sort of resembles Ace the Bat Hound, by the way, who was Batman's pet dog who wore, implausibly enough, a mask to conceal his true identity. Of course, he didn't really belong to Batman. He belonged to some other guy. But they took him along on adventures because kitties like to see dogs, you know. And he was Ace the Bat Hound. Why Ace? Well, that was his real name, I guess. But the Bat Hound? The Bat Hound? You know, I mean, how do they come up with this stuff? Well, we could call him Bat Dog, but that doesn't sound quite right, you know. B-A-T-D. No, can't do that. People will think that we're crazy. I don't know. Let's see. The bat animal, no. Bats are animals. Bat canine, no. Too erudite. The bat German shepherd, should we call him? Come here, hero hound. That's it. That's what I'll call you. Come on, get up here. Why would they have a male dog on their adventures anyway? Female dogs are so much more tractable. Come here, hero hound. That's right, jump up here. Do the forbidden. Oh, you miserable animal. Don't, come over here. Come over here at once. Now, I want you to smile for the camera. Come here. Come here. No, don't sniff my crotch. Nothing there for you. Come on, get up. Come on. You miserable animal. You jump on me every time I don't want you to. The one time I asked you to. Okay, hero hound. Oh, now you want to play with your bone. I'll tell you. These dogs. Well, I'm going to take a break. Not that you're going to know, because when I come back, it will be as though a second has elapsed. But I will take a break, and we'll be right back with more Superhero Confidential. You know, superheroics is essentially a very lonely, and I hate to say it, but it's still true, male-oriented occupation. Thing is, with us superheroes, I mean, it's hard for us to keep girlfriends and wives because they never know when to believe us and when not to. It's like, well, can I come to your Justice League of America meeting? Why, no. One of them might lose his temper and crush your head like an eggshell. Oh, you're just saying that because you don't want me around. Wonder Woman's there. Well, Wonder Woman's incredibly powerful. You know, or like you come in after fighting, Ozymandias or whatever, and you know, you're just beat. You know, you've been through hell. You've been through the mill. You just put the sun back in its orbit around the Earth so that the Earth wouldn't wobble off into it and roast to a crisp. And there's your wife or girlfriend going, well, where were you? You were gone for 3 days. Oh, I was saving the solar system. Oh, what's that on your lip? You know, what's that on your chin? What's that on your collar? Lipstick? Honey, that's blood. No, I've just been saving the universe, and all I want to do now, I'm just so tired. All I want to do is just sit down and eat something. Well, if you think I'm going to wait on you, handful, you've got another thing coming, especially when you are gone for 3 days and you can't bother to call or anything. You know, why don't you let me know? Why don't you leave me a note? You know, well, honey, I'm trying to explain. Well, you know, I don't think we're right for each other. We don't have the same interests. You're off, you know, gallivanting around the galaxy, and I'm stuck here at home. You know, and why can't I come with you? Well, if you came with me, then people would probably figure out my secret identity, and you would never be safe from my enemies. Oh, I'm disposable. Is that it? You intend to find another girlfriend, so you don't want to give it all up. Why don't you stop this superhero stuff? My father has a nice job for you. It's right there. It's open. You know. It's like I don't really want to work at a Blockbuster Video for $6 an hour, and not when I am the most powerful man in 3 states, and it doesn't seem right somehow. Well, you know, this whole superhero stuff, there's no benefits, there's no job security. You could get knocked out by an asteroid, and where would I be? You don't have any health insurance. Oh, you don't have any sick days. Well, if I wanted to take sick days, I guess I'd take them now, wouldn't I? Don't talk to me like that. You're emotionally abusive. That's what you are. It's like, look, I'm busy trying to save the world, and if you spent less time getting in my way and more time helping me, then
this whole job would be a whole lot easier, and we would both benefit from it because I would be getting to where I want to be in this thing. They tapped me for the superhero special on HBO, but well, of course I couldn't do it because we had to go to your family reunion, and I passed up a big opportunity to be on the Young Superheroes program on Showtime because you were having one of your little mini crises yet again, and it seems every time it looks like I'm actually going to be going somewhere and doing something with my incredible superpowers. You're in the way somehow. It's almost like you're afraid that I'm going to actually amount to something, and then you'll figure that I don't need you anymore, and it's time for me to move on to greener pastures. But even if that were the case, it's just an incredibly selfish thing for you to do, to get in my way like this and keep me from living up to my full potential as a superhero. And it's like, oh God, look, it doesn't do any good to lock yourself in the bedroom. I can see with my X-ray vision what you're up to in there. I'll burn away the tears with my heat vision for you, so you don't need a hanky. Oh, come on. The big love's heart, it just melts. That's the thing, that's what got me about Superman. He was just such a bastard. I mean, it's like Lois Lane. Oh, Superman, I love you. Why don't you marry me? My enemies will get back at me through you, blah, blah, blah. I do it in a minute. Well, what if I told you I have superpowers? Oh, sure, right. She's got superpowers. But he was incredibly mean to her, and I guess it's sort of, comic books are a mirror of society. They reflect the predominant attitudes of their day. One time Superman was trying to woo somebody. I think it was some Kryptonian actress, Luma Lumai or something like that. And what was Superman's music of choice? Remember, this was 1958. It certainly wasn't rock and roll or rhythm and blues or jazz. No, it was a gigantic orchestra playing the 101 Mellocrino strings or something. A symphony I wrote just for you, he says, bearing the entire orchestra perched on a gigantic flat rock in his hands and flying overhead. Did he get time and a half for that, I wonder? Anyway, Superman was kind of a bastard. He was really mean to Lois Lane. It kind of made you like him a little less, but you got to remember, too, that these things are aimed at little boys, and they could care less. If it's not your mom, then who cares? If it's your mother, you fight for her honor. But if it's anybody else, who cares? Oh, you punched my sister. Well, I'm gonna have to hit you on the head with a rock. But if it were any other girl, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care. Just that it's my sister. And Superman was a mean bastard. That's all I can say. And Superboy wasn't much better either. Instead of pitching woo at the attractive red-haired Lana Lang, whose father was an incredibly famous archaeologist, which of course, the tie-in with that is, he's an archaeologist, so of course he will want me to take him back in time so he can see these things unfolding as they actually happen. He's always ruining everybody's specialty. He always knew more than anybody else, and I don't know. He, for an alien, he certainly was very versant in Earth ways, perhaps a little too much so. But let's see what we have here. Adventure, Revolt of the Super Pets. Now there's another one. We already discussed this, but Super Horse, Super Dog. Oh, and Super Monkey is terrorizing Saturn Girl. That's a good one. Super Dog is biting Cosmic Boy, and Superboy is getting a good kick in the ribs by Super Horse. And the thing is, the actual cover, is very exciting and graphic. A little too busy if you want to know. But the inside was so drab, and the Super Pets didn't really revolt. And I remember the issue well. But my copy didn't have a cover, Let's see. Oh yes, Jerry Lewis.
Unbelievable. Jerry Lewis, and it used to be Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis comics until they split, and then, and I actually have a couple of copies of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis comics, just to give you an idea of just how comprehensive my collection is. But like I say, I have hardly any golden age comics, and quite a few, silver age, and a great many bronze age. Ah yes, amazing adult fantasy. You know, the Marvel people, they're really like, they're spinning off and spinning off. I think they've got 6 or 8 different titles just for Spider-Man alone. And who would have guessed, you know, back when Amazing Fantasy number 15 came out in 1962, that they would be spinning an empire off of this rather implausible and somewhat dubious character. And, you know, it is all due to the work of one man, Mr. Steve Ditko. Spider-Man's number 1 through 39 were simply, without question, one of the best series ever in the history of comics. One of the best serial comics. Another good example is the Cerebus numbers 150, I don't know, 125, 175, something in there, or 125 to 150. I don't know. It got really good for a while there, and then Dave Sim came out with Cerebus Reads, which really kind of stunk. And I haven't read the 12 issues following that. And from the looks of it, now he's in this thing where Cerebus is in a bar getting drunk, and it's a little annoying, but he has 100 more issues to go, which should be interesting. It means 8 more years of Cerebus in the year 2004. As a matter of fact, you may very well be seeing reruns of this very program in the year 2004. See, as a comic collector, I'm so compulsive that, you know, I have every single one of these videos numbered and dated, and I plan to run them all consecutively at some point. And since I've been doing this for about 5 years, 6 years almost, yeah, and then I'll rerun them, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. The year 2002, you may be watching this, and then again, maybe not, who knows. Anything can happen between now and then, right? But they got, like, you know, all these Spider-Man things, and then, you know, so Superman had to get into the act. First they kill him, then they bring him back, but they don't bring him back as 1 or 2 comics as originally. No, they bring him back as, something like 8 comics, some of them only tangentially connected to Superman. They use his death as a cynical marketing ploy to spin off 8 inferior products from the one good, unique product. Although that's not strictly speaking what happened. You can see where that would be a very shrewd and admirable strategy. Like Superman, the Unknown Years, people who've met Superman and the way he's affected their lives, comics, and the Adventures of Superman's Haberdasher, quarterly, of course. There's not that much going on with Superman's Haberdasher. For years, Clark Kent wore the same drab outfit. He could have been working for IBM. Blue suit, white shirt, red tie. And that was it, you know. No sartorial finery for Mr. Kent. No, sir. Never would he appear in a silk smoking jacket. No. Always the same. Blue suit, white shirt, red tie. And the explanation that the editors gave was that, well, he invented a special dye which, when he changes clothing at super speed, is fire resistant, and therefore, you know, that's why he has to keep wearing those same colors. But what explains the same model of glasses, you know, and what explains the fact that nobody ever whisks the glasses off his head and puts them on and say, hey, these are clear glass. You don't wear glasses. Why do you wear them? Oh, to make myself look more intelligent. Well, you know, you're the top reporter on the world's most famous newspaper, and just how intelligent are you trying to appear already? It would seem to me that you don't have to worry too much about on that score. And that's the thing, you know, it's a very funny thing that what would Superman's identity be? A writer, you know, albeit a reporter, not a fiction writer. But, you know, I mean, if Superman wrote a novel, what do you suppose it would be about? Probably about a thinly disguised account of an alien who masquerades as a reporter. Or, you know, I can just see it now. Clark Kent writes a book called My Friend Superman, and it shoots to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and they make a motion picture out of it, and it wins an Oscar and all this, and Clark gets incredibly famous. But the thing is, the one problem, the one flaw in the ointment, and this could have been an incredibly plausible Superman story of the Silver Age, roughly between 1958 and 62. This story would have fit quite nicely into the continuity. Nobody would have noticed anything. And they had a lot of stories that were very similar to that particular one. But in a world in which Superman exists, wouldn't they be kind of blasé about him after a while? It's like, oh, my friend Superman, who gives a shit, you know? I'm sick of hearing about this. Superman does this, Superman does that. You know, Superman t-shirts, Superman towels, Superman coat racks, you know, Superman's finger holding up the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm sick of it. You hear? We're going to boycott all Superman products. And, you know, the Metropolis and Gotham City, you know, they'd be sort of like I always thought of them as perhaps corresponding to Philadelphia and New York. In one comic book, they give the game away. They say they are nearby. Gotham City, if it's obviously New York, that means that Metropolis is either Baltimore or Philadelphia. And folks, let me tell you right now, I really don't think it's Baltimore. Because, you know, there's nothing colorful at all about the citizens of Metropolis as imagined during the Silver Age. But anyway, the citizens, you know, there'd be the Batman partisans versus the Superman partisans. It would be like gang war, you know, except instead of red and blue, Pepsi and Coke, Crips and Bloods, it would be Supermans versus Batmans. And I'm surprised this has not ever happened, to tell you the truth. Well, you know, as kids, we would always say, you know, oh, you know, Superman, that's boring, you know, I'm a big Batman fan and all this crap. Batman, what can he do? He doesn't have any superpowers, blah, blah, blah. But, got a point there, you know, Batman is intrinsically more interesting than Superman. Howsoever much you would prefer to be Superman, you would you would enjoy talking to Batman a lot more. You know, I mean, he's just... In fact, Superman was sort of like DC Comics personified, and Batman was more like the Marvel. He's more like a Marvel character. Let's face it, he's more like a Marvel character. Marvel could do wonders with Batman. In fact, they came out with this character called the Punisher, who, for every, you know, in every respect practically, could very well be just a Batman ripoff. Except, you know, he kills people. His parents weren't murdered, as far as I know. He doesn't wear a bat costume or any real costume at all. He does have some dubious powers, which I think have to do with the impermeability of his skin or something. And he's quite insane. Yes. Yes, indeed. Oh, Angel Love. Boy, what a stinker. Yeah, there's some really bad ones. We're only in the A's, you know. Maybe I should, like, the Archie comics. I got off on a tangent. You know, they do these superhero things. Archie comics did the worst superheroes ever, period. You know, back in the 40s they were doing them. They were just deadly starchy and dull. In the 60s they did them, and they were just like stupid and an insult to your intelligence. And also, they'd have a pretty girl on the cover that you'd never seen before and would never see again as a gag. You know, I thought you were going to help us bring... Archie, I thought I told you to bring some holly. I did. Girls, meet Holly. And he's got his arm around this slut, you know, who you never see again. Even on the Archie meets the Punisher. That's great. It's one of those insipid crossovers. And, you know, the Archie line, you should really boycott the Archie comics, because you know what they did back in the 50s? They made a big stink
about the horror comics that EC were putting out, because EC had the nerve to satirize Archie in Mad Magazine. And the guy who ran Archie Comics had a lot of pull with various people, and they managed to drive EC practically out of business. Mad had to become a magazine because of Archie Comics. One of those little known facts. The Atom. What a stupid little sawed-off runt. The Adventure. The Avengers. What an infantile name for a superhero group. Oh my God. Barney Google and Snuffy Smith, like incredibly stereotypical hillbilly archetype here. Yes, we have a picture of a Golden Age Batman, the big chunky smiling Batman, and then we have the Gimmick Age Batman. Let's see, the Golden Age Batman. Well, first there was the dark, mysterious Batman, which lasted from 38 to maybe about 43, 44. Then Batman became domesticated. He was in the Sunday comic strips. This lasted from 43 to 48. And then there was the big chunky Batman, from the Bob Kane grinning Batman from 48 to 52. And it sort of coincides with the Gimmick Batman, where they always fought criminals who tried to ward them off with gigantic props. And then there was the aliens and extraterrestrials who, like Batman fought during the sci-fi 50s, from about 52 to 58. Then things got, and then there was the cute, gimmicky Batman from 58 to about 63, something like that. Batgirl, Batmite, Batdog, Bat you name it. Nothing ever happened in Batman, and it was really going downhill. And then in 63 or so, they decided to give him a new look. They called it the New Look Batman. And they put a bright yellow circle around the little bat. And that was like a hiatus. The character looked like it might be Gil Fox and Carmine Infantino. They sort of gave it an overhaul. And it looked like the character was going to amount to something. But then the television show came along, and forget it. It was straight down the toilet. It went to the camp Batman. But after the television show blew over, they had a brief flirtation with a sort of farcical, comedic Batman. They had the guy who did Johnny Hazard do a couple of issues of Batman. It didn't pan out. So then they got Neil Adams in on the job in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was perhaps to a certain degree the peak of Batman for quite some time. The Neil Adams, the Batman, the good Batman stuff, not since the very beginning of the run had there been such an excellent Batman. Well, as all good things must pass, this too also eventually faded out in the mid-70s. And that's sort of when I stopped following the character. And then for about 10 years, I really didn't have that much interest in it. But then, of course, the Dark Knight series with, who was that incredibly famous comic artist that even the non-aficionados know? He also did Ronin, Frank Miller, and he also rejuvenated Daredevil for Marvel. Frank Miller's Batman in the mid-80s, just brilliant. But then, again, that was a limited miniseries, and after that, straight down the crapper as far as I could tell. They kill off Robin. Well, actually, it wasn't the real Robin. Robin #1 split off and became Nightwing. Then they got this annoying teenager who the readers voted to kill off. That was Robin #2. Now they have Robin #3, and who knows, maybe they'll be working on Robin #4. Things got a little interesting for a while, I will admit. Batman broke his neck. They got some new guy out there. He was a psycho, and now the old Batman's back. And but the thing is, they did pretty much the same thing with Green Lantern too, except the old Green Lantern never came back. So I don't know. They're like spinning off themselves. I just can't. If only they would just kill off some of these characters every now and then, like the Joker. Hasn't he been around long enough? Isn't it time to give him a rest? Maybe he could disappear for about 10 years. I know he's the best thing they've got, but I mean, please, like I'm sick of that grinning face. And Spider-Man's Aunt May. You know, I haven't really been following Spider-Man that closely, but I'm wondering, have they finally killed off Aunt May yet? Or gotten rid of her in some way? See, that's when Spider-Man started going really downhill. After issue number 40, they kept up a pretty good front for a while. Right up until issue number 98 or so, you know, Romita was doing a good job and his successor was doing a good job. But then the thing with the Spider-Man with the 8 arms, forget it. And then Aunt May marries Dr. Octopus around issue, you know, in the 120s block. And please, after Gwen Stacy died in issue number 121, that was it. You know, no more Spider-Man for me. I started following it again in the late 70s, early 80s. It started getting a little interesting. He was going out with this felon called the Black Cat, whose only power was to cause bad luck. I met her once, you know. Sort of how I got my power of always being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, we got quite a bit to go here. We're only in the B's. What's this? Bats, cats, and Cadillacs. Okay. Who puts this out anyway? Now Publications. All right. Beavis and Butthead. Yeah, okay. Boy's Life. Boy's Life was a comic book? Oh no, it's called The Men from Boy's Life. And it's got a real photograph on the cover and not a drawing. You know, those are the worst comic books. Gold Key always did this. They had like shittily reproduced photographs on the cover. Actually, it looks some guy that looks like Donny Osmond is on the cover of the Men from Boy's Life magazine, and he's hugging a dog in a snowstorm or something. It could be a drawing, but it looks an awful lot like a photograph. And that's the other kind to avoid. The kind with these incredibly realistic drawings that look exactly like photographs, rotogravure engravings, let's say. Also, ones with gigantic looming heads and hands overshadowing the tiny participants at the bottom of the page are ones to avoid. Here we go, Dell Comics, the Beverly Hillbillies. Tarnation, the Clampetts are on vacation. Big Bang Comics, Big Shot Comics, Black Axe Comics, okay. Black Canary got her own comic for a while, that's good. I always liked the Black Canary. She wasn't very much on the personality parade, you know, I mean, she didn't really have a personality. DC was very bad with women. I mean, they couldn't really do women superheroes, and their male superheroes didn't really have much of a very well developed. Wow. Here's a Kirby character called Bombast that I've never seen before, put out by Topps Comics. It must be incredibly rare. It's a one-shot. It's only worth $3 though. It's got a trading card in it. Kirby only does the cover. Forget it. Poor Jack Kirby. I think he passed away recently. Oh, here we go. Booster Gold. Another Kirby cover. And, geez, it has Superman. A Kirby Superman, you know, is a really good, it's almost worth buying the whole lousy comic just to get Kirby's rendition of Superman. Kirby is sort of like the, I don't know. He's sort of like the George Bernard Shaw of what Shaw is to literature, what Dryden is to poetry, so Kirby is to comics. Booster Gold. Geez, do they, my God. Well, it didn't have a very long run, 25 issues. Let's see, there was Boy Comics. Boy, nowadays they couldn't get away with that, but back in the 40s, you know, there were no real buzzy, God, one of those insipid teen heroes. Captain America. Captain America went through some hard times for a while. Well, first his sidekick dies, and then he's replaced by some wrestler in the 1950s. And Then he disappears for 20 years. They find him frozen in an ice cake in 1964, and he immediately becomes captain of the Avengers. You know, that's quite a promotion. Frozen in an ice cake, doesn't know what's going on for 20 years. I know, you can be our leader. You know, being a leader doesn't mean having all the facts. Being a leader means being born to command. I was born to command. I am your captain, Captain America. And there's Captain Canuck, Captain Easy. Oh, okay. I hate it when the characters of a comic strip spout ad copy on the cover of the publication. We have Captain Easy knocking out some goon, and at the bottom, Wash Tubbs with an incredulous expression on his face, seemingly not even knowing what's going on, is saying, "The Great American Swashbuckler!" Exclamation point. And, you know, that's just really bad. Oh, here we go. One of those comic books with a photograph cover. Car 54, Where Are You? With an inset of a cartoon cowboy and Indian. Oh, there's the Caroline Kennedy comics, put out by Charlton as a one-shot. It's worth $60 now. I wonder if any copies of it went on the auction block. God, the Carnies, an Archie Comics publication. It's sort of like a bunch of freaks, right, in a circus. What a lousy idea for a comic book. I wonder how many issues that lasted. See, that's the wonderful thing about the Overstreet Guide. You know, of course, I picked mine up for $1, which was an incredible bargain by any stretch of the imagination, even though it's like a year or two out of date. I mean, unless you're a really avid fan and really into the collecting. Let's see, the Carnies, #1. There was only, it published annually, huh? Okay. So there's been one issue, maybe 2 or 3 by now, worth $2. I wouldn't pay 2 cents for it, to tell you the truth. Challengers of the Unknown. I love the Challengers of the Unknown. Like, they teamed up with the Doom Patrol, another one of my big favorites in the 60s. I don't have much use for the new Doom Patrol, to tell you the truth. And, the Challengers and the Doom Patrol, they didn't really get along that well. You know, the Challengers were yet another Kirby creation. Kirby is incredibly important in the history of the comic book, although perhaps one might prefer the eccentric productions of Steve Ditko, whose political philosophy is somewhere between Genghis Khan and Ayn Rand, I understand. Kirby was a force in virtually every decade that the comics were published. The 1940s, he was just him and Joe Simon. He just came out with tons of characters for both Atlas and DC Comics. The DC Kirby stuff, you know, it wasn't that memorable, but I think Kirby had a hand in Captain America for a long time. Kirby introduced the full color, the full page splash panel, and he also introduced the 2-page panel. You know, I mean, he's just like full of innovations. And you know, he was a force in the 50s. He did a lot of the monster magazines, and in the 60s he rejuvenated the entire Marvel line. In the 70s, he did the same thing for DC. But the only worthwhile comics published in the entirety of the 70s were the Neil Adams Batmans and the Jack Kirby, Jimmy Olsen's, Mr. Miracles, Forever People, New Gods series, the fourth world, the fans called it. And in the late 70s and early 80s, Jack Kirby was in the vanguard of the independent comics, which are now such a force in the market. He did Captain Universe, whatever it was called, Captain Cosmos. He was also the first person to come up with a fetus character, the fighting fetus. I forget what his name was, Romax or something. I really should dig those out. You know, the Captain Cosmos stuff, or whatever it was called, it didn't really catch on in a big way, which is really too bad. Let me see if I can find it here. No, I don't think they have it here, but, well, I mean, they do, but it would take me too long to find it. There's a lot of captains in the comic book world. There's Captain Atom, Captain Battle, Captain Britain, Captain Canuck, Captain Carrot, Captain Carvel, Captain Confederacy, Captain Courageous, okay, Captain Crunch, Captain Davy Jones, all right, Captain Easy, Captain Electron. I'm beginning to look, the word captain is beginning to look kind of weird. Captain EO, Captain Fearless, Captain Flag, Captain Flash, my God, Tomboy, female superhero. Let's see, Captain Fleet, Captain Flight, Captain Fortune, Captain Gallant, Captain Glory, Captain Hero, which is of course a Marvel Comics, an Archie Comics publication. Captain Hobby, Captain Hold, Captain Hook, Captain Jet, Captain Justice, Captain Kangaroo, Captain Kid, Captain Marvel, which I think is where the whole Captain thing started. We had our little discussion about Captain Marvel. Captain Midnight. I used to think that song After Midnight was actually Captain Midnight. We're gonna let it all hang out. Captain Nice. Remember that? TV? Oh, it's worth $35 in mint condition. Wish I'd bought it. Captain N, the Game Master. Captain Paragon and the Sentinels of Justice. Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. Value, cover or less. Captain Pureheart, a really stinky Archie comic. Captain Rocket, Captain Savage, Captain Science, Captain Silver's Log of Seahound, Captain Sinbad, Captain Stern, Captain Steve Savage, Captain Stone, Captain Storm, Captain 3D. Ooh boy, it's a Kirby Ditko, put out in 1953 by Harvey Publications. Wow, and it's worth $50. Captain Thunder, Captain Tootsie, Captain Triumph, Captain Venture, Captain Video, Captain Willie Schultz, Captain Wizard, and the one I was looking for, Captain Victory and the Galactic Rangers, published by Pacific Comics, value cover or less. But this, of course, was before Kirby died. The Kirbys will be incredibly collectible, even though, of course, there's a real glut of them, because everybody figured they'd be collectible. So, hundreds of them. Oh, the Clutching Hand. Yes, and it's good to see that the Clutching Hand has its own comic book here. Comic Cavalcade. Well, this stuff's great. Conan the Barbarian. I always refer to Conan O'Brien as Onan the Vulgarian, in case you're interested in my opinion, which you probably aren't. Except, why are you still watching this thing? Let's see, Crime and Punishment, Crime Does Not Pay, Crime and Detective, Crime Fighters, Crime Incorporated, Crime Mysteries, Crimes by Women, Crime Suspense Stories. Okay. So, anyway, yes. Lots of crime issues. Now, you might be interested to know that the Daredevil, who was so popular in the Marvel Comics, was actually a totally different character put out in the 1940s by the Lev Gleason people. It was really a kiddie comic. Daredevil himself wasn't around very much after his teenage sidekicks, the Little Wise Guys, took the whole magazine over. Geez, poor Superman. There we go. Deadly Foes of Spider-Man. Okay. The Joker's one of the first villains and one of the few villains to have his own comic book. Did you know that? I'll bet you didn't. Let's see, Detective Comics. Okay. Dick Tracy. I shouldn't really talk too much about my incredible enthusiasms, but if I had every single Dick Tracy continuity from, say, 1936 to roughly 1961, I could die a happy man. I love Chester Gould's Dick Tracy, and I've read quite a few of them, but there are big gaps in my knowledge, and I would love to see particularly the fly face ones, which I remember dimly from my childhood, and of course his little nephew, Lil Doc, also with flies hovering around his face. Also the little orphan Yetis,
there's quite a few of those that were very much worth reading. Most of the really best ones were, in fact, collected in anthologies, which I had the great pleasure of reading through recently. So yeah, and the third in this triumvirate of great action strips and great serial strips, that is continuities, would be Elsie Seeger's Thimble Theater starring Popeye. Now I will say I have read every single one of the Sunday ones, which I have in hard copy, but I would love to read all of the dailies as well. Ah yes, creepy and eerie comics. About 10 years after EC shut down, the horror comics came back, although they were never quite the same. A lot of the same people did them, but the magic had gone. The Fantastic Four, I never really got much into the Fantastic Four. I mean, I read about the first 50 issues of it. They were interesting enough. If I had bought all of the Marvels I read in the store in the 1960s, I'd be a very wealthy man. Thing is, I was perversely loyal to DC and would never buy a Marvel comic if I could help it. I think one of the first Marvel comics I ever bought was Spider-Man number 50, and then I sort of didn't buy any more for a while until about Spider-Man number 70. When I was just starting to get excited about Spider-Man, I was just beginning to grow too old to read comics. I actually went through a phase, several phases, in which I did not read comic books. I think when I turned about 13 or so, I sort of lost interest in them for a while, but then it only lasted for about 6 months. And then all through high school, I was sort of vaguely interested in them. But once I got into college, it was underground comics that I was more interested in by then. I never really totally lost interest in the art form per se, just in the mainstream publications. I might not have ever gotten back into reading comics if it weren't for the rise of the independents and Captain Victory and his Galactic Rangers. That fateful day in about 1980 when there was a new Kirby put out not by one of the majors but by an independent. Of course, Cerebus was running then too. Cerebus and ElfQuest and the First Kingdom, they were like the first independents. They called them ground levels back then. They weren't undergrounds, but they weren't quite conventional comics either. Those four, those were the big things that got me back into reading comics. Although, to this day, I have not read the First Kingdom. I have all the issues, but I haven't read them yet. I've been saving them. And ElfQuest, well, kind of cutesy. Okay, I guess, but not great. But Cerebus is another story. Now, the first 20 issues or so, he's just getting his stride. After that, uphill all the way. I mean, there are big bumps where, padded aardvark tales, as one friend of mine called them. But I'd say from about issues number 20 to issues number 170, the man could not really do very much wrong. I mean, the Astoria sequence in particular, really wonderful. Or Jaka's story, I guess it's called. It's great. Get it in hardcover. Anyway, it's a brilliant run when you think about it. 150 issues. And, you can cut the guy some slack. Another comic I really wish I had was Fat Man, the Human Flying Saucer. It's put out by C.C. Beck, who also did the original Captain Marvel. And I read it in the store when it came out, which was, I guess, 1967. And there were only 3 issues. They were all put out by Beck, who did Captain Marvel. And they are worth, in fine condition, they'd be worth $100. The only 3 issues. And even in fair condition, or good condition, they'd be worth about $14. I would gladly pay $14 for all 3 issues of that, if I could find them for that price, which is unlikely. If I could get like really beat up ones with the covers half off and stuff, if I could get them for like $5, let me know, because I want them. Yeah, this is sort of like addictive, this impulse. You can never really collect every single comic published, and even if you could, you would never have time to read them all. The Fool Killer. Oh, what a delightful B. Who could forget that beloved character? Yes, indeed. The Guys in the Foxhole. That's a nice name for a comic book here. Firestorm, the Nuclear Man. Yeah, right. It's like calling the teenage Peter Parker calls himself Spider-Man. And so, DC's ripoff, which is perhaps one of the least well-conceived concepts in all of comic book fandom. It's like this kid gets in a nuclear accident and his mind is taken over by a nuclear physicist, and he has the power to transmute elements, and he can fly, and oh please, please, enough of this radioactivity causes superpowers. I mean, it doesn't, it causes your damn hair to fall out and you die. Green Lantern, that's great, Oh yeah, I think once the wrong hero evolves and actually gets powers of his own, I think I'm going to start calling myself the Green Man. And unlike the Green Lantern of the Golden Age 1940s, whose one vulnerability was wood, which was the one substance that his power ring would not work on, as the Green Man, who would be the good version of the wrong hero, my powers would derive from wood. It would sort of be like a cross between, Swamp Thing and what have you. But, so remember, I will be, like Fat Man the Human Flying Saucer, I will be the only superhero with 3 identities. Yeah, quite a gimmick, huh? Itchy and Scratchy. Well, I've been wanting to get copies of that. Yeah, I really haven't been buying the comics since about 1988, which is really too bad, because I hear there's some really good stuff out there. But then again, there's always some really good stuff if you know where to look and who to ask. Justice League of America versus the Jesus and the 11 Apostles action figures. Judas sold separately. Yes, maybe I should talk a little bit about what we're going... Oh, we're looking for Law Dog. Okay. Lex Luthor comics. Lippy the Lion and Hardy Har Har. Okay. Lil Abner's a pretty interesting comic to read, but, I've always preferred Abby and Slats, personally. The continuities were written, I believe, by Al Cap, and then his brother, Mr. Kaplan, took it over for a while. Man Comics. All right, each book-length story is from true life. Now this is what I want. Man Comics. No more boy comics for me. Oh, it's a Marvel Atlas publication. It only lasted for 4 years. I guess it was their ripoff of the EC comics and the crime comics of the day. Let's see. Well, Ant-Man. It all started with Ant-Man, believe it or not. The Marvel people, that was really the only superhero they had going for a while, was Ant-Man. And I have an early Ant-Man issue. It was in Tales of Suspense or something. I don't know what the hell it was. And it was only when Spider-Man came along in the Fantastic Four that the shaky Marvel publications became viable. And eventually, of course, they came to dominate the market. DC used to distribute Atlas comics. And all through the 60s, DC and Marvel had this little war going, this little rivalry. I think I might have discussed this already. Marvel referred to DC as Brand Ek, and DC referred to Marvel as Brand I. Well, in any event, Metamorpho. Now that was a strange one, but it had a sense of humor, unlike Firestorm, the Nuclear Man. But it was very similar in that Metamorpho got into some freak accident in an Egyptian tomb or something, and all of his component body parts were a different element, and he could manipulate them at will. And he had this guy, Simon Stagg, who was a villain, but very knowledgeable in chemistry, to advise him as to what to do. And it was one of those insipid educational comics which taught you as well as, sort of gave you the adventure you craved. Sort of like The Middlemen.
very, the Mr. Monster comics were always really great. I forget who does those. Put out by the Dark Horse Publications, which was the spin-off of the Aardvark Vanaheim Publications, who put out Cerebus, or Zerbus, as one of his friends once called him. Yeah, you know, the thing is, when you get this Comics Jones, you collect stuff like Neil the Horse, things that you would never even be caught dead reading, but because it's a #1, you get it, you know. Or OMAC, One Man Army Corps, because it's a Kirby, you get it, you know, even though the concept is not really very appealing. Steve Ditko, The Missing Man. You know, Steve Ditko had a great thing going with Shade the Changing Man, but it sort of fizzled out after 6 issues, and you would actually have to look very hard to find the obscure publication in which what was intended to be '7 would appear in. Fortunately, I have it, but I can't name it offhand. Plastic Man. Besides the DC and Atlas heroes of the 40s, Plastic Man was perhaps the single most outstanding comic hero, and all done by Jack Cole. It is all the genius of Jack Cole, who committed suicide, who was also from Pittsburgh, incidentally. And, you know, I mean, you got Fawcett Publications and Captain Marvel, and you have the Plastic Man, you know, people put out by national periodicals, but actually Vital Publications / Quality Comics was responsible for Plastic Man. So that's, you know, that's one of the bright spots of the 40s and early 50s. I have, I think, the last Plastic Man put out by Quality Comics, or the second to last one, which is a reprint of an earlier one, but nonetheless, I'm happy to have it. I'm happy to have any of the Jack Cole Plastic Mans, if I could ever get them. DC Publications reprinted them at one time, a few of them anyway, in one of their DC specials, and I could kick myself for not buying it when I had a chance. Now, of course, it's probably very, very difficult. The Silver Surfer, of all the humorless cult heroes, I think he was perhaps the epitome of humorlessness. See, Spider-Man was always making with the wisecracks. The Spirit had a certain, you know, devil-may care charm, howsoever implausible some of the plots were. And even Superboy was good for a laugh from time to time. But Superman and the Great Cleveland Fire. There's one you don't hear much talk about. Tales of Terror, Tales to Astonish, Tales of the Unexpected, Tales, okay. Lots of tales, you know. That's all these things really are. We're in the T's, and we're almost done, and I'm sure that you're mighty glad of that. Top Cat. The Indisputable. Close friends get to call him TC. What do his enemies call him? You mangy little alley cat. You flea bag. Ah yes, True Love, True Sweetheart, True Crime, True Comics, and Trump. Put out by Harvey Kurtzman after he spun off from Mad Magazine. Only 2 issues. Davis, Elder, Heath, Jaffe, Wood. Worth $120 in extra good condition. I would love to have both issues of Trump. They were published in 1957, and if you ever see them, let me know. I will gladly purchase them from you. I'm just like that guy who runs the androids dungeon in The Simpsons. Well, anyway, this is a nice little trip down memory lane. You know, I understand that when I am staring into a book, it's not exactly the most scintillating visual, nor is it really particularly easy to hear what I'm saying, since I do have a tendency not to enunciate quite as clearly as I otherwise might. But anyway, gee, some nice comic covers here. Comic Parade, wow. 8 pages of ambient slats. That's just what I would like to have. Ambient slats is perhaps one of the most underrated of all of the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s newspaper comic publications. You know, a brief recap of the industry. Comic books really started in 1895, 96, you know, with newspaper comic strips, which eventually in the early 30s were collected, compiled, and put together in booklet form. The 32-page, 40, you know, 80-page, 100-page format. Eventually, from its humble beginnings as the action-adventure strip in the comic pages and the funny pages of the newspaper, like, Captain Easy is often cited as one of the progenitors of the form. It's a long leap indeed from Captain Easy to the wrong hero, me. And you're tuned to Cafe Cabaret. This has been my presentation of Superhero Confidential. Please tune in next week for the last Wrong Hero of the season. We will be returning with the Wrong Hero in September. Tune in next week for 101 Damnations. Thank you.